Good afternoon, members. I call the Committee of the Whole on Bill 6, Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2026 to order. Shall Clause 1 pass? Recognizing the member for West Kelowna, Peachland.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to speak here a bit to the bill to start off and just have a little something to lead off before I ask my first question here. Should fall within the time. If that's all good.
Proceed.
Thank you. Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak and speak to and ask questions regarding this legislation at this stage. And I want to be clear at the outset, there are elements of this bill that make sense. Modernizing services, making processes more accessible, reducing the need for people to attend in person for routine matters. Those are reasonable objectives. People expect government services to keep up with how they live their lives. And in many cases, that means digital access. So this is not about opposing modernization. It's about making sure modernization is done properly. Because when government moves services online, especially services tied to identity, licensing, and personal records, the stakes change. The convenience increases, but so does risk. And that's where I think this committee stage matters, because this is where we step back from the broad intent and ask whether the system behind it is solid, whether it's secure, whether it's accountable, and whether it will maintain public trust. Because that's the piece that can't be assumed. It has to be earned. One of the things I think about with this legislation like this is how quickly systems can move from being helpful to being questioned. Not because the intent was wrong, but because the safeguards weren't clear or weren't strong enough or weren't communicated in a way that people understood. And once people start to question how their information is handled or whether the system is secure or whether mistakes can be corrected, confidence drops quickly and is very difficult to rebuild. This legislation deals with something that people take seriously: their identity, their personal information, their legal authorization to drive. These are not small things. They are foundational to how people interact with government and with society. So when we move those processes into an online environment, we need to be very clear about a few things: how information is being collected, how it is being stored, who has access to it, how long it is retained, and what happens when something goes wrong. Because something always goes wrong at some point. That's just reality with any system. The question is not whether there will be issues, it's whether the system is prepared for them. Another piece of this is access. Because while online services increase confidence for many people, they don't work equally for everyone. There are still people across British Columbia, particularly in rural communities, seniors, and others who rely on in-person services. And the concern is not just about adding online options, it's about what happens next. Do in-person services remain fully available? Or do they gradually diminish as online systems expand? That matters, because access to government services should not depend on your comfort level with technology. There's also the question of system reliability. When people rely on a digital system, they expect it to work consistently, securely, without interruption. When it doesn't, there needs to be a clear, immediate path to resolve issues. So I think it's important that we understand what contingency planning looks like. What happens if the system is down? What happens if an application is processed incorrectly? What happens if someone cannot access their documentation when they need it? These aren't edge cases. They are real-world scenarios that will happen. And finally, I think it's important to speak to accountability, because as systems become more digital, they can also become more opaque. Decisions happen in the background, processes are automated, and it becomes less clear to the individual how outcomes are reached. That's why oversight matters. That's why transparency matters. And that's why even in a modernization effort, cannot lose sight of the need for clear lines of responsibility. Who is accountable? Who answers when something goes wrong? And how is that communicated to the public? So again, I want to be clear. This is not about resisting change. It's about getting it right. Because when government asks people to trust a system with their personal information, with their identity, with services they rely on every day, that trust has to be backed by more than intention. It has to be backed by structure, by safeguards, by accountability. And with that in mind, I do have some questions for the minister. Do you want me to keep going, or?
Did you want to ask a question on clause 1?
I do have questions, yes.
On clause 1?
Yes.
Okay, all right, proceed.
So my questions, I tried to organize them a bit, so a little more easier here, but I have just general, really to get the intention really behind the bill and behind the clause, just for, to make sure that we are fully understanding what's going on, and really to get the intention behind what this bill, what it means and what it is. So I start off with those questions first. So my first question to the minister would be, can the minister clearly explain the core intent of this legislation beyond administrative efficiency?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So before I begin, I just want to welcome the staff that's going to be with me here today and thank them for all their work. So I have from the Attorney General Ministry, Carolyn Mills, Tom Fainu and Nina Bindra, and then from ICBC, Steve Roberts. So just appreciate them being here today to help guide us through this. So this is part of ICBC's modernization efforts in general. This is a key one because it's a customer-facing aspect. I mean, I don't know how many people out there have either lost a driver's license or need to replace it. I know myself that I was at the office on my birthday last time because I had no time and I had to do it that day. So it's about modernizing processes for people, and replacing or renewing your driver's license online is an easy way to not only get your service needs met in an easier fashion online, but also to free up office resources to things that may be more complicated or take up more time, including driving tests.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And what problem is the government trying to solve that cannot already be addressed within the existing system?
Minister.
Thanks. So legislative changes were needed as a result of some outdated language that put restrictions related to where and how you can renew your licensing. So in order to make online renewal possible, legislative amendments were necessary.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister or Attorney General. So how does the government define success for this legislation once it's fully implemented? What would that look like?
So I guess success, the first level of success will be customer satisfaction related to the fact that they can now have a new service for online renewal and replacement. And then I guess that would be the primary one to measure the success, and along with the other modernization processes that ICBC is going through.
Thank you, Chair. And is this legislation primarily about convenience, cost savings, or system transformation?
Minister.
All of the ones that the member just listed are part of this, all of the above.
Thank you, Chair. And what risks did government identify at the outset, and how are those risks being mitigated?
Minister.
Thank you. So in terms of risks related to this type of service improvement, I think the two that would be primary were privacy or fraud. Of course, like every time you design a new system, you have to think about how to mitigate all of the risks associated with it. So the reason that this is pretty low risk in terms of the effect of the risk mitigation is that ICBC's been collecting personal information already since 1996 in most forms, so they already have really good protections related to their systems and protecting people's privacy. And the next one is related to fraud. Well, there are other jurisdictions that have gone to online renewal. So there's a time between this legislation being in force and the implementation window where they will put the right systems in place to mitigate any risks associated with fraud for renewals online.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And how does the government ensure that moving services online does not reduce public confidence in the integrity of the system?
Minister.
Thank you. So as an organization, as I mentioned before, that already has a database full of information, they have cyber protections against any security threats already in place that are pretty rigorous. The only, I think, new piece of information I'm told is the email address, because you would need an email address to renew, but it would be, again, being part of that system of information being held by ICBC that's already protected under serious cybersecurity protections.
Thank you for that, Attorney General. Now, wait, did I ask that already? No, that's the other one. So what safeguards are in place to ensure that confidence does not come at the cost of security or accountability?
Minister.
Thank you. So as mentioned before, there already are pretty rigorous systems and controls in place with respect to ICBC's current operations and holding of people's information. So I'll just go through a few of them just to give you a sense of what they are. So first of all, there's obviously the legislative controls that we as a government and previous governments have set through the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection of Privacy Act and the Information Management Act and the Electronic Transaction Act. So that's the legislative framework with which they operate that sets out certain standards and rules. They're also guided by key provincial standards, the Core Policy and Procedure Manual, and that's specifically Chapter 12 on information management and information technology management that guides their operations. They also have a security policy. It's based on ISO 27002, that framework for security standards, and they're reviewed and they're updated annually. They have multi-layered controls, and they're working on, continue to evolve, obviously, every time there's a new threat landscape. And they also do, which is I think really important, regular penetration tests and vulnerability scans against systems and security exercises to test their incident response plan. So those are just some of the things that are there, along with, I guess, finally, secure databases that are located within Canada.
Member.
Thank you for that, Attorney General. Now, how will the government measure whether public trust increases or decreases after implementation?
Minister.
Thank you. So there's many ways of getting at the concept of public trust, and I guess it's very particular for ICBC because they're a client-based organization. So the way that they get at that idea of whether or not they are trusted or services are meeting standards is, first of all, I think a measure will be uptake. So how have people used the service once it's online? And because people live so much of their own lives online, it will be telling if there's not a lot of people that use the service. So hopefully there's good uptake. There's a customer survey that happens after transactions that you're prompted to transactions with ICBC. Of course, they have a complaints process. So if there is a complaint, there's a group that will receive it and process it and understand what that is. And they also do regular brand perception studies and customer satisfaction studies.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And what independent verification mechanisms exist to ensure the system is functioning as intended?
Attorney General.
Thank you. So we were just talking about how ICBC is not a private business. So if you think about a private insurance company, the level of oversight and structure is way different than ICBC. ICBC has a lot of rigorous oversight. And so obviously it would be the internal ones that they choose to put in place. So in a sense of implementation of something like this, you would have user testing or insight panels, so you could test from external users how it was going and whether before you launched. So there'd be the internal things that they did as they were implementing. And as an organization, they would be subject to audits, the Office of the Independent Privacy Commissioner, the ombudsperson, those kind of external independent oversight bodies that they're subject to that a private insurance company would not be.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And so just pivot a bit, just following up with a few themes kind of that the Attorney General mentioned here in the last few answers. Now, can the Minister explain at a high level how personal information will be collected, stored, and protected under this new system? And just how, if anything, it will differ from what they currently capture and what versus how that will change from any new changes with any new information.
Attorney General.
I think we had a conversation a little bit, maybe not focused on personal information. That was, I mentioned that they're using their existing database, and the only new information that this would involve is a collection of an email address. So there are actually quite a bit of, first of all, I think first and foremost, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, so FOIPA in the province, really sets out the privacy standard that citizens can expect when they are interacting with entities like ICBC in terms of their private information. And there's no new database in the system, as I mentioned before, and nothing will be stored on the online platform. It'll all go to that database that they already hold and they're used to as an organization holding and protecting that private information. And at the very offset, the person will have like a high standard to verify their identity. So there's many tech systems now that can do that, where your identity is verified before you go further down to the application process. So it just starts out with that rigor of understanding who the person is and then protecting their identity after or their information once they've given it.
Member.
And thank you for that, Attorney General. And just want to go back to one thing you said, just to make sure it's clear. You mentioned about the individual confirming their identity. But it was that was pretty much it verbatim, almost what you said. Can you just explain a little more deeply how that process is and what that will look like? Thank you.
Attorney General.
Thank you. So there's a lot of interesting ways that technology can verify your identity. And I'll just start by saying that at this point with this particular service, ICBC is still looking into it. We have to pass the legislation first, and then it gives them the authority to move forward on implementation. So there isn't one particular method that they've nailed down at this stage, but there's a lot of examples of how government already does this online. So how do you verify somebody's identity? So in order to do that, they'll be leveraging their existing experience and then also working with the Ministry of Citizen Services to confirm the final authentication measures, because they obviously have a level of expertise. The secure authentication methods are used by Canadians to access highly sensitive personal tax information, like the CRA is an example of how that works with online verification. And sometimes you have to have two-factor authentication, video verification, like up to like fingerprinting sometimes. But it all starts from the fact that this is only for replacing or renewing. So these are individuals that already have had an issued driver's license. And so that makes the level of verification a little bit different than maybe if they were the first ones coming in.
Member.
Thanks for that. That explains the digital realm very well. I just have a question, just kind of going to the analog version, I guess, of just to confirm if there's changes or whatnot. So that explains it, how it will potentially be moving into for the online component of it. What will happen with just walking into an ICBC office and renewing your license that way? Will someone still be able to go in person and approve their identity, or I guess, will that ever be changed in the future? Are there any plans for that?
Attorney General.
So the in-office service will still be available as it is today, like all those people right now that are waiting to renew or replace their license, that they can still show up at those service centers and get that service. This will just move an option to have an online service.
Member.
And what categories of personal data will be retained as part of online transactions? I know, I believe the Attorney General mentioned that the new personal information that will be dealt with by CBC will be email. But on a driver's license, they have your home address, they have a photograph, they have potentially your personal health number. Are those items I just listed, are those held by ICBC or are those not currently? Yeah, just wondering if they are held by ICBC, because they're on your driver's license, probably on all of ours right now. If they have been held by ICBC and traditionally are, is anything changing in how ICBC will store or collect that information moving forward?
Attorney General.
Thanks. So they already hold a lot of that information. We're talking about renewal and replacing. So yes, they have a database right now that holds personal information. We talked about the protections that are in place already for that existing one. The new piece is the email address, which will go into that same system of protection.
Member.
And how long will this information be stored, and what governs the retention period?
Attorney General.
So a very interesting answer to that question, I think. So it's under FOIPA that would guide how long you can retain information. And if you think about a driver's license are used in a lot of ways to verify identity. So under those rules specific, so different information will have different time periods of how long you keep it. But when it comes to driver's license information, it's till the death of the person. And that's to make sure that their fraud or anti-fraud systems could ensure that there's no identity theft or whatever, because it's tied to that person until their death.
Member.
Perfect. And what safeguards are in place to prevent unauthorized access, breaches, or misuse of any personal data?
Thanks, Chair. I think I've answered this question pretty thoroughly about the different systems and controls they have to protect from the breaches of private information. If there's something specific that the member has that I didn't go over yet, that I'm happy to answer.
Member.
Yes, and I'll move to a more clear question regarding that. In the event of a data breach, what is the notification and response protocol?
Attorney General.
Thanks, Chair. So if anybody's listening out there and wants to know what happens in a data breach situation, I will go through the different steps. So first of all, ICBC considers a privacy breach any accidental or deliberate incident involving personal information. And they require immediate action regardless of the sensitivity of the personal information, if that's occurred. So there are five key steps that they'll take in responding to a privacy breach: report, contain, evaluate, notify, and prevent. So any possible privacy breach must be immediately reported to a manager or supervisor and reported to ICBC's Privacy and Freedom of Information Department. A file is set up with all incident information, and the business area will be contacted to understand the nature and details of the breach. ICBC will suspend the activity that led to the breach, recovering any personal information, records, or equipment where possible. An assessment of the risk will be conducted to determine what other steps are necessary, such as notification to customers and/or additional mitigation. And notification will be provided to the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner. And ICBC will work with the OIPC investigator assigned to complete any necessary investigations. So those are the steps that they take in those events.
Member.
Thank you. And will individuals have the ability to review, correct, or request deletion of their personal info?
Attorney General.
So individuals do have rights under FOIPA to do what the member suggests. And so as an organization bound by FOIPA, they would follow those procedures.
Member.
Thank you, Chair. And what third parties, if any, have access to this data, the new data, or any data that's obtained regarding driver's licenses?
Attorney General.
Thank you. So the authority for any third-party disclosure is pretty well laid out under FOIPA. So under FOIPA, it gives, I think there's like 10 authorities that, where you have to find a specific authority if you are giving any information to third parties. So it's pretty clear under our legislation what the rules are related to that. ICBC has a privacy statement that's publicly available, so people can understand, and it's pretty clear about what their statement is about their privacy, and how they use that. And so the member can refer to that specifically. And just to keep, again, to the scope of these legislative amendments, there's no new, except for an email address, personal information other than stuff that's already being collected and is protected under FOIPA and has been for many years.